everybody. Welcome to Smart Money. My name is Ken Dolan. With me is my partner, co-host, and wife, Daria Dolan. Get your asbestos overcoat out today. We're going to be talking about the savings and loan problems, unless you've been living under a rock. It's on the front page of about every newspaper in America.
Thank you so much for saying this. We discussed this before the show, and he said, now you're going to say this, and this, which he just said. So all I can say to you out there is start dialing if you have a question about the safety of your savings and loan or bank at 1-800-752-CNBC. And, of course, for the last 10 minutes of the program, you just stop talking here. For the last 10 minutes of the program, we'll open up the phones for anything that's on your money mind, and the Dolans will be happy to try and field your financial questions at that point. 1-800-752-CNBC. Lots to do today.
Are you done yet?
Yes, now I am.
That's what happens when you have the chance to speak first. You can say what you want. It's Smart Money on CNBC. Welcome, everybody. Let's get started.
I got you.
Hey, that's what you get
That'll
when you
teach you to do that to me.
very often in television, we don't usually talk about it. There's lots of prompters and cue cards. There are no prompters and cue cards, and you could find that out just then. All right, go ahead.
All right, no, you have. Oh, no, I'm going to start. That's right. Now it's my turn to talk, and I forget. We take a couple of minutes at the beginning of every program to share a couple of pieces of information that we think you might find particularly interesting or handy to use, something you should know, something you should be aware of, and today is no exception. Ken, if you'd like to get started.
Yeah, there's a new publication out. In fact, I have called for it because it seems we're always constantly talking, not battling, but talking with the IRS about something. There's a new brochure called Your Rights as a Taxpayer, and if you watch Smart Money on a regular basis, we're not anti-IRS, we're just pro-taxpayers. And it's called Publication Number 1. And if you'd like to know what the IRS can do and cannot do to collect taxes, let us give you the number. It's 1-800-424-3676. That's 1-800-424-3676. It's called Your Rights as a Taxpayer. It is free. And as it should be, it is publication number 1. As soon as I get my copy, we're going to talk about it.
Okay. All right. And we're going to be very careful how we talk about it.
Yes, sir.
All right. You don't look good in stripes.
That's right. We'll be audited for the rest of our lives.
Exactly. Well, we are now, it seems like. I don't know. All right. Let's just take one more moment here. As we said today, we're going to talk about the savings and loan bailout bill, what it means to us as depositors, potentially what it'll mean to us as investors if we want to take a good look at the savings and loan part of the stock market and see where there might be some good bargains and some good investments. But for those of you that are strictly worried about the status of your bank or savings and loan, there is an organization in Massachusetts by the name of VeriBank, and they have an 800 number for $10 to put your mind at ease if you cannot read a financial statement yourself. They will be happy to inform you of the status, the safety of your particular bank or savings and loan or savings bank. And you can get for $10 on a credit card, you can get information as well as a wonderful brochure called Know Your Bank. And for $2 extra, above the $10, they will let you know about a second or a third bank. VeriBank, if you'd like the booklet on how to understand whether your bank is safe or not, or your savings and loan, and also to request information concerning your specific institution, 1-800-44-BANKS is the number to call between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
It's a very good book here.
It's an excellent
book.
book.
We've got it right here. We highly recommend you call 1-800-44-BANKS. It's very, very good. Are you ready? Let us give you the number. It's 1-800-752-CNBC. It is going to be a very, very busy hour.
And we want you to take a look at some tape that has been shot in the past few weeks via the news crews here at CNBC and your own local news people. And you'll recognize some of the people, I think, that we're going to show you right now concerning the savings and loan bailout bill. So take a look.
I take a special pleasure in the historic legislation that I will sign here this morning.
My opinion, this legislation falls short by $30 to $50 billion in taking care of the problem that exists today.
No, the bill is not perfect, but it is a first step, a crucial step, toward restoring public confidence.
The American people have been extraordinarily well served by this vital piece of legislation.
The local paper boy looking ahead to college, or the young couple dreaming of their first home, the retired teacher whose savings are her entire lifetime. We have a commitment to protect the savings of these Americans and millions like them across this country, and we will honor that commitment.
You're back.
Now, here we go. There's troubles, there's no doubt about it. There's no problem, there's no debate whether we have a little bit of a difficulty in the S&L business. In fact, we're going to put up a chart right in just a second after we introduce our guests. Senator Jake Garn dubbed him the prophet of gloom and doom. Sounds like Joe Granville back in the old days. His name is Bert Ely. He's president of Ely & Company. He is a financial institutions consultant. Our other guest is Paul Schosberg. He is president of the New York League of Savings Institutions. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. Dara, you have the dubious distinction, before we begin with these distinguished gentlemen, to show the famous chart.
All right. Well, and the chart you're about to see is not all that comforting. In 1982, we have the number of failed savings and loans, and this is courtesy of Veribank, at 113 institutions. In 1988, it was up to 402 institutions, savings and loans, that failed. And currently, here in 89, we are at 551 and counting. Now, according to George Bush, Bert Ely, this is $166 billion bailout, has been called historic. And Senator Don Regal has said that it would bring the most massive financial restructuring since the 30s. And Secretary of the Treasury Nicholas Brady has said that this is a great opportunity for investors. Your opinion, please.
Well, I think this bill is an important first step in cleaning up the S&L mess, but it is only a first step. It does not authorize enough money to do the total job. In my opinion, the administration is going to have to go back to the Congress in 2 or 3 years and ask for as much as another $30 to $50 billion to do the job. In terms of investment opportunities, I think the most likely buyers for these insolvent S&Ls are going to be other banks and S&Ls, because we're going to have a lot of restructuring that is a consolidation of the marketplace, and basically that's going to take place in large part because a bank is going to buy the S&L across the street or down the block and merge it in with its own operations.
Paul Schosberg, how did it get to this point?
Well, the president also called this bill a monster, and it is, over 1,000 pages, and no legislation is an answer, it's only a process. We got to this because of the most extraordinary confluence of events and forces we've ever seen in the financial community. Deregulation accompanied by a loosening of the vigilance of our safety net of supervision and examinations and regulation.
By whom?
Well, by regulators at the state and the federal levels, and by Congress in not exercising oversight. By the states in particular in opening their charters to a new breed of entrepreneur that came in motivated entirely by greed. They saw deregulation as a license to steal. At the same time, you had the collapse of the economies in the south and southwestern states, and that created problems that nobody foresaw.
No.
So what you're saying, Paul Schosberg, as a banker, president of the New York League of Savings Association, the wonderful banker of It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart and stuff, we have been taken over by a lot of half-baked artists, artists.
Not in most states. The losses that Congress was horrified by, that Bert has been documenting over many months, were concentrated in about a dozen states. As a matter of fact, 25 large institutions have made up a frightening proportion of all these losses. That's the terrifying part of it.
Bert, when did you guess? When did you surmise, we only have about a half a minute, then we'll break, surmise that there was a major problem? It seems to me 1981 or not?
No, not quite that early. About 1985.
Okay. What gave you that, what was the straw, in your opinion, that showed you we had a major problem here?
Well, I could just see the losses piling up in these institutions, that in fact they were insolvent, even though the government wasn't ready to say so yet.
If you'd like to join us here on the line, the lines will be full today. Our number is 1-800-752-CNBC. We'll come back to field your calls and answer some of our questions. We'll be right back.
Buying 35mm film can be confusing.
It's not confusing.
It's not? Look at our simple chart. Chart?
There's 100.
Use it here.
But not here.
There's 400.
Use it here
or there.
Not here.
And there.
There's 1,000.
Don't use it here or here.
Just there.
See?
I see.
Introducing 35mm Polaroid One Film. With One Film, you can get beautiful pictures here, there, or just about anywhere. New 35mm One Film. For beautiful pictures, the choice is easy.
Dog foods come, dog foods go. But there's still no better food for keeping your dog fit and healthy than these old favorites. Alpo Canned and Alpo Dry. After 50 years, nobody beats Alpo.
Robert McNeil is executive editor, co-anchor of the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour. He's also a provocative critic of network news programs and talks about things in them that he finds desirable and undesirable. Robert McNeil, tonight on CNBC.
One of the great advantages of doing business with a firm like Schwab is that you're dealing with professionals across the whole country. They're creating financial advantages for the individual investor.
Many of our customers transfer their other brokerage accounts to Schwab because we make it easy. We help the customer complete the right form, they sign them, and we do the rest. It's that simple.
Call today for free information about Schwab services. 800-247-7500.
Investors, accept $50 just to compare your broker against Quick & Riley, one of the largest and strongest discount brokers. At Quick & Riley, you save up to 76% off full-rate commissions. And now you get 5 checks, each good for an extra $10 saving on any trade within 6 months. Plus, the special study of the 200 fastest-moving NYSE stocks.
To get $50 in checks plus the special study, call 800-851-1400. That's 800-851-1400. Call now.
Thanks so much for joining us here on Smart Money on CNBC and making us part of your afternoon. We are the Dolans. Today we're talking about a controversial subject, to say the least, the savings and loan bailout or the savings and loan crisis. We have two very respected guests in our studio, Paul Schosberg, who is president of the New York League of Savings Institutions, and Bert Ely, who's president of Ely & Company. Bert, we're going to talk later with Henry Peltz about investors in the S&L crisis, making money as investors. So I don't want to talk about safety of investors. Investors are up to their own.
That's right.
Safety of savers in light of all this maelstrom of confusion.
Depositors in every federally insured savings loan in this country are protected up to $100,000 by the federal taxpayer. They should not worry.
Wait. Protected by whom?
By the federal taxpayer. The federal taxpayer stands behind the deposit insurance funds. The federal taxpayer is who is paying for most of the bailout of the FSLIC. And that's who stands behind the depositors.
Paul, do I want to proceed on this line of questioning or not?
Bert's exactly right. And what this legislation underscores is that the government, which means all of us taxpayers, has an explicit commitment to these deposit insurance funds. That's a contract that's been made with the American people, with depositors, since 1933. And this legislation made that sacred.
Paul,
let me just, while we're on that tack, when a bank or a savings and loan fails, what percentage of the people are over that $100,000 limit? Has there been any study done?
It depends on the institution. In the case of Continental Illinois, when it became insolvent, it had many large uninsured depositors, and the FDIC made a policy decision to protect them for fear of instability in the entire banking system.
But why, when I walk into my local savings and loan branch, if I'm coming in with a $250,000 check and I want to put it into a money market account in that bank under Daria Dolan, no banker comes to me and says, this really isn't a good idea. Why not?
Well, it really isn't a good idea because
why doesn't the
banker tell people
Well, they certainly should tell you that. They should. It's their obligation to say, are you aware that your savings are federally insured up to $100,000 per account? I mean, that's just smart banking, and it's the correct service to customers.
Many bankers also feel that their bank, in fact, is not going to be among those that fail.
Bert, what happens? Let's take the next step on Darius' question, Bert Ely. I have $112,000. Pick a number. I'm $12,000 over the limit. Bingo, belly up, see you later, my bank is gone, being taken over by the FDIC. I'm protected to 100. What happens to the other 12,000 bucks?
You may or may not get some of it back over a period of a couple of years. For that $12,000 over the $100,000 limit, you're a general creditor in the failed institution, and usually you'll get back some fraction of it. But it'll take a while.
What about the policy on CDs? I'm in the middle of a one-year CD. I'm 6 months into the burn. I'm halfway through a one-year CD, and the bank goes belly up. What happens to the interest on that CD? I heard that some banks don't have to pay it.
Well, what they will do is, if they liquidate the institution, they'll honor interest up to the date they close the institution. They'll send you back a check. It's up to you as to how you reinvest that money.
Okay, so they'll send me my principal and interest to date.
Right. To date.
Okay,
Paul,
great.
pretty safe bet if it was one of the Southwestern banks where they really were goosing up the return on a certificate of deposit. If it goes into receivership, odds are you won't be seeing that return for much longer.
You certainly shouldn't see that return. One of the problems the legislation was designed to address was to get these insolvent institutions off the competitive landscape, because not only were they running up their own losses, but they were driving up the cost of funds for institutions from Maine to California and weakening the financial underpinnings of the two-thirds of the industry that's healthy.
Bert, we're going to come back in just a second. I know you've got a comment there, but we have to break and do a little television business, if you don't mind. We are talking smart money, and thanks to our friends at Polaroid for bringing this show to you today. We'll take a quick break and come right back, see what's on Bert's mind here. We'll wait and see. Thanks for joining us.
This program is sponsored in part by new Polaroid 35mm 1 film.
Buying 35mm film can be confusing.
It's not confusing.
It's that? Look at our simple chart.
Chart?
There's 100. You use it here, but not here.
There's 400.
Use it here or there, not here.
And there.
There's 1,000.
Don't use it here or here.
Just there.
See?
I see.
Introducing 35mm Polaroid 1 film. With 1 film, you can get beautiful pictures here, there, or just about anywhere. New 35mm 1 film. For beautiful pictures, the choice is easy.
If you're taking the SAT, Stanley H. Kaplan would like to remind you what to bring. First, you'll need a pencil to fill in your answers, an eraser to change your mistakes, something sweet for energy, even a watch to keep track of time. And if you haven't taken a Stanley H. Kaplan SAT prep course, you may need to bring along one of these. Kaplan has produced more top scores than anyone else. Call 800-321-6200 for a free introductory lesson. Stanley H. Kaplan. Take Kaplan or take your chances.
Investors, here's Martin Zweig, who manages over $1 billion investment dollars, to tell you his stock market secrets.
I have 2 sacred rules. 1, don't fight the interest rate trend. 2, don't fight market momentum. If you can spot meaningful changes, not just zigzags, in interest rates and momentum, you'll be mostly in stocks during major advances and out during major declines. This kind of strategic switching over a period of 21 years produced 10 times the profits of simply buying and holding the stocks. My new guide to market forecasting tells all about my key indicators, which led to those huge rewards, and how you can use them. Please accept the guide as my gift.
Receive Martin Zweig's new guide, plus this $20 bestseller as bonuses with your trial subscription to the famous Zweig forecast, keeping you up to date on all key indicator changes.
Just call 800-253-2300. Use Visa or MasterCard. 800-253-2300. Call now.
Well, unfortunately, we're talking about the savings and loan industry today because of the savings and loan bailout bill, and our 2 special guests are Bert Ely, who's president of Ely & Company. If you've read anything on the savings and loan bailout, you have seen Mr. Ely quoted at some point or another.
You can't get an opinion out of Bert, though.
I know it. I know it. And our second guest today, Paul Schosberg, president of the New York League of Savings Institutions. And in this part of the country, you have seen a great deal with Mr. Schosberg's name on it. One point we would like to make to you, courtesy of our producer. Please do not call with questions about the safety of your individual bank. These 2 gentlemen will not comment on that. For that, if you would like to call Veribank in Massachusetts, they're in the business of letting you know the answers to that type of question. We showed the number just a moment ago. We'll put it up again. 1-800 BANKS, BANKS, and you can, with a credit card for $10 an institution or $2 for the second one after that first institution, they'll be happy to send you a statement on it.
Bert, you were making a comment on what Paul Schosberg has to say in terms of how fast interest rates would be coming down.
Interest rates paid by the insolvent S&Ls are not going to drop as fast as many people think, for the simple reason that this legislation that the president just signed isn't going to put enough money out there fast enough to bring the rates down.
Now, wait a second, Paul. Thank you, Bert. There are some healthy S&Ls, Paul. Comment on that. Is it a geographical consideration, or are they just smarter than everybody else?
Well, two-thirds of the industry, approximately 2,000 institutions, are both solvent and profitable. Their image, I'm afraid, is being distorted by the one-third that really has been running up incredible losses.
And how are they being affected, Paul, rather than just goodwill?
Well, one of the most dramatic effects is the way these insolvent institutions have been pricing their business, both on the deposit side, where they've been bidding up rates, and on the lending side, where they've been using obscene teaser rates to make adjustable rate mortgages and the like. All of these financial transactions take place in national marketplaces. So what's going on in Texas, Oklahoma, or Arkansas is felt right here in New York and New England and Connecticut.
You're nodding your head, Bert. You agree or disagree?
I certainly agree with that. That's the healthy banks and S&Ls in this country have been hurt and continue to hurt from the keeping open of these insolvent S&Ls.
But what about now the goodwill that's been counted on the books that will have to be cut back and phased down through 1992? How many other S&Ls that look good now aren't going to look so good by 1992?
That's a really interesting dilemma, because in the
Paul,
Northeast,
do this. We don't want to cut you short. Let us take a quick break. We'll come back and answer that. Then we're going to go to the phones. Just take a second. It's Smart Money. We're talking about the S&L crisis. Our number is 1-800-752-CNBC. Come on back.
Aerospace, petroleum, real estate, electronics, just a few of the industries you need to know about. Analyzed in the only investment service you need to have, the Value Line Investment Survey. Value Line gives you more than just headlines. We'll pinpoint future price performance, investment safety, estimated yields, earnings, dividends, and we do it for 1,700 stocks in more than 90 different industries. The Value Line Investment Survey, every week. The Value Line Summary and Index section, pinpointing 100 stocks considered most timely, complete coverage. Ratings and Report section, complete coverage. Selection and Opinion section, complete coverage. Economic and Market Analysis, complete coverage.
Order the Value Line Investment Survey. Try it for 10 weeks at just $60. Order now and receive this bonus, the 2,000-page Investors Reference Service. Full-page reports on all stocks updated weekly. Call toll-free 800-253-2300. That's 800-253-2300. The Value Line Investment Survey.
If you suffer from any of these medical problems, a contoured chair with optional heat and massage may help. I'm Art Linkletter, and I'm concerned about these health problems. That's why I want to mail you this free contoured chair catalog. You see, contoured chairs are orthopedically designed to provide the kind of firm support you need to help reduce pressure on your legs, thighs, hips, and back. And to raise your legs above your heart, all you have to do is press this button. If you're concerned about your health, get free facts by mail about Contour. Find out about the marvelous relaxation that comes from the proper positioning of your body. Let me mail you this free Contour chair catalog, filled with details on the health benefits Contour chairs provide. Call me to get this important free information by mail now.
Call 1-800-435-1600. That's 1-800-435-1600. Toll free. Call 1-800-435-1600.
Pervading the news for these many months has been the savings and loan bailout bill, which was finally signed last month. And we'll be back to talk more after the real news with Sue Herrera.
Good evening. In tonight's headlines, an upward revision in the second quarter gross national product from 1.7 to 2.7%. Corporate profits, meanwhile, fell for the second consecutive quarter. July single-family home sales surged up 14.4%. That increased the highest since December of 1986. Shares of AMR jumped 9 3/4 on rumors that investor Marvin Davis is eyeing that company. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average slid almost 17 points today. More on these stories at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CNBC's Business View.
As Daria says, we're talking about the S&L crisis. If you'd like to join us in the phones, our number is 1-800-752-CNBC. I want to quickly remind you that after we say goodbye to Mr. Schosberg and Messrs. Schosberg and Ely, we're going to be talking with our final guest on how, as an investor, maybe there is a phoenix in the ashes. Maybe there are some good ways to play or invest in the S&L crisis on Wall Street. Henry Peltz from Keefe, Bruyette & Woods, a company that specializes in bank recommendations, will be with us. Right now with us from Boston, my hometown, is Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hi, how you doing today?
How you doing? All right.
Good. I had a question I wonder if either one of your guests could address regarding Danny Wall's role in the savings and loan crisis. Are there any comments on that?
Bert Ely, Dan Wall.
Head of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board.
That's right. And chief S&L regulator since July 1987. In my opinion, in all candor, Danny Wall has not done a good job. He has not been to this day candid with the Congress or the American public about how big the problem is. And under his leadership, several hundred S&Ls were disposed of last year in a manner that's going to be very expensive for the American taxpayer.
Good. Paul, a comment?
Well, I think Danny and his colleagues at the bank board had a tough job because their data gathering was just really archaic. I think the numbers just plain got away from them, and that's why you had this explosion.
How will an S&L look in the future, Paul?
I see Bert smiling here. I don't think Bert is
stop smiling. This is not a funny subject. No,
but with the numbers, I hear that. I have a little personal computer in my office. I cranked the same numbers the bank board had, and I reached cost estimates that have turned out to be much more accurate than their estimates. I think they had enough data to tell the Congress and the people how big the problem was.
How bad it was. Okay.
So that we wouldn't have waited until 1989 to start working on a real solution.
How soon, Bert, could they have blown the whistle, if you will?
1984, 1985.
That, in banking terms, where we've come to in 1989, is a long time ago. Paul?
That's true. But, Ken, in 1986, Congress was ready to pass a $27.8 billion recapitalization of the FSLIC. And between the House and the Senate, they decided to play politics with it. The House wanted to throw a housing bill on top of the recapitalization bill. The Senate was playing another political game, and the session of Congress ended stalemated.
And briefly, Bert, we're going to go back to the phone.
All right. The key thing is that in the spring of 1986, the Reagan administration didn't ask for enough money to deal with the S&L problem then. So this has been a problem that's gone on for at least 3 years where people haven't asked for enough money, and consequently we have legislation now that still is not enough.
Isn't there $60 million of the RTC, the Resolution Trust Corporation, with Greenspan and Brady and Jack Kemp and 2 public members? There's going to be a release of $60 million before the end of September. Is that a Band-Aid? $20 million by the end of September. Is that a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage or not? Billion, yeah.
It's a down payment on the problem, but it's not enough.
Not enough. Okay.
Well, it's also not enough to spend effectively in 30 days. They're not going to do case resolutions in 30 days with that money.
Yeah.
They're going to try to replace high-cost deposits
Is
with
it being
cheaper
thrown
money.
at them? It seems like it's you've got to spend this by September 30th.
In effect, it has been, because this is part of federal budget politics. Money has to be spent, raised and spent by September 30th.
Could it conceivably be misspent?
I don't think it will be misspent. Whether it's spent as effectively as it should be is another matter. I don't think the money will be wasted.
Okay, let's go to Madison, Wisconsin for a call from Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hello.
Speak up, Jim.
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering, do the problems savings and loans have also apply to credit unions?
Okay,
and is the government willing to bail them out?
Good question. Paul?
Well, again, let's not talk about entire industries. There are problems that are endemic in our financial system. You have the risk of bad underwriting. You have regional real estate markets that collapse. You have the inadequacy of internal controls and people who aren't as competent as they ought to be. You can't characterize an entire industry saying it's all good or all bad. There are human failures that took place and created this crisis, and you're going to find it in credit unions, in commercial banks, and savings banks, all over.
Paul, would you take a second to discuss what the League of Savings Institutions, you are president of the New York League of Saving Institutions. What is that organization?
Well, we're a trade association that represents 83 savings institutions, S&Ls and savings banks in New York, although some of our members are based in California. We have one based in Connecticut.
Your deposits are up dramatically. I mean, it's looking fairly healthy for your gang of banks.
Well, that's the irony when you talk about this crisis. In New York, the institutions are healthy by and large. Our savings are up. We'll probably go over $10 billion in annual mortgage lending again this year. And I think the customers of our institutions have maintained confidence in their local savings and loan and savings bank.
Good. All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Frank in Myrtle Beach. Welcome, Frank. What's your question?
My question is, I have considerable securities being held in safekeeping with banks and savings and loans. My question is, what is the status of that under the insurance program?
Paul, or Bert, safety, are we talking $100,000 again, or does that extend to other kinds of security?
No, because those securities are not on deposit with the institution, they're just being physically held. I would see no reason why there would be any particular concern in that regard from the standpoint of the deposit insurance limit and this legislation.
I would say you might be better off at the brokerage firm, but obviously Wall Street has its own problems too.
Right.
One point I want to make, and a couple minutes left, Bert Ely and Paul Schosberg also. Let's get back, not to be waving the alarmist flag, talk again just for a second about safety. I don't want people running out and taking their money out of the institutions represented by Paul and some very, very good people in the S&L business.
Well, the key thing is that depositors in every bank in S&L in this country are protected up to $100,000 in effect by the American taxpayer. And so they should not be worried up to that point about the safety of their money in a particular institution.
Paul?
Well, the legislation that the President signed 3 weeks ago makes it very clear that the FDIC is the single insurer of all deposits at banks and thrifts. There happen to be two funds within the FDIC, but the FDIC is now the sole insurer. It's a strong institution, it's well run, and it's well capitalized.
Will it be around for a while, Bert?
Oh, I think it'll be around for a while. But again, behind the FDIC stands the American taxpayer, and that's what really counts in this whole process.
If I think that my bank has been fraudulent, maybe we're talking some very expensive paintings, I'm getting a feeling at my bank, at my S&L, there's an insidious problem here. I'm not exactly sure. What recourse do I have? To whom may I speak?
Well, banks and thrifts are regulated, state-chartered institutions by their state banking departments, federally chartered institutions by the Federal Reserve or the FDIC or the new Office of Thrift Supervision or the Controller of the Currency. They all have regional offices. In the New York area, they're in New York City. In any metropolitan area, there's a regional office. Any taxpayer or depositor can make an inquiry to determine whether any problem has been seen in examinations.
Or make a comment.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion, though, Bert Ely, it would be tough to prove. I think we're going to find that not a whole heck of a lot of the so-called fraudulent bankers get picked up and jailed on this. What do you think?
Well, I think that's the case because, frankly, there are some real gray areas there as to what's crime and what's just mismanagement. It's a very hard case to make. Oftentimes, the smoking gun is a file cabinet full of paper, and that's why a lot of these fraudulent bankers are never going to actually make it to jail.
Okay.
At the same time, the Bush legislation authorizes $50 million for stepped-up enforcement against criminal activity and fraud in banks and thrifts.
15 seconds, Bert.
But in the final analysis, I don't think that's what's going to stop the problem. The real problem is we don't have an actuarially sound deposit insurance mechanism in this country. As long as we're stuck with that, we're going to continue to have problems.
Will we bail it out again?
Yes.
And you, Paul? You think this is it? Once is enough?
Well, this is a process, not a solution.
Okay. Well, it may also be a liquidation bill, may it not, gentlemen? As opposed to a bailout bill?
Well, we're going to have more legislation 2 or 3 years down the road, and how they deal with it then may be different than how they've done it so far.
Well, we haven't asked them yet, but we'll ask them on national television. You guys come on back toward the end of the year, and let's take a look back and a look forward to 1990. Paul Schosberg and Bert Ely have been our guests. We've talked about the savings and loan crisis. So lots of good information, straight from the shoulder information, with the overriding thing being safety, a $100,000 guarantee. Now you want to make some money at it. We'll do our best with our next guest, who is a thrift research analyst at a very prominent Wall Street firm called Keefe, Bruyette & Woods. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Come on back, everybody.
In business, a lot can happen. If you want to keep up every week, you have a choice. Not Forbes, not Fortune. You can read Business Week, or you can read a week of the Wall Street Journal. Either way, you'll find out all you need to know. The question is, how much time are you willing to spend in the process? Business Week is designed for busy people. One look at the cover, and you'll know exactly where to turn inside. A quick scan of the contents page, and you'll have all the events of the week that interest you. Business Week does more than inform. It entertains with stories that are compellingly told in both words and pictures. If you want to keep up with what's going on out there every week, all year long, there's more than one way to go about it. The choice is yours.
A subscription to Business Week has never been smarter, because if you act right now, you can take advantage of a very attractive offer. 32 issues of Business Week for the low basic rate of only $24.95. That's just 78 cents an issue, a savings of more than 60% off the $2 cover price. And along with your paid subscription, Business Week will send you this compact database, the latest in microchip technology, absolutely free. In addition to having full calculator functions, the databank also stores up to 120 names and phone numbers, and even serves as an electronic appointment book. And remember, it's free with your paid subscription to Business Week. Here's how to subscribe.
Just call 1-800-626-2500 and we'll send you 32 issues of Business Week for only $24.95. This low basic rate saves you more than $39 off the cover price, and your satisfaction is guaranteed. Remember, the databank is free with your paid subscription. The number again is 1-800-626-2500. Call now.
Couple of great guests gave their opinion. There's been an awful lot of gobbledygook and marbles in the mouth when you talk to an awful lot of people about the S&L crisis, but they had some good opinions.
They truly did. They truly did. And it was nice to see somebody from a Savings and Loan Association that kind of represents a bunch of strong ones.
That's right. All right, listen, we've gone through all the gobbledygook. We've got some good hard information. We've done some philosophy. We've checked the facts. Now let's take a quick trip south in Manhattan to Wall Street to see if, in fact, amongst the confusion, as Paul Schosberg said, some very healthy S&Ls. As Bert Ely said, yeah, but some not so healthy S&Ls. Is there a dollar to be made as an investor? Let's cut through all this, and let's talk to an expert. His name is Henry Peltz. He is with Keefe, Bruyette & Woods. He's Vice President for Thrift Research. We have hit it right into the cheap seats on finding the exact right guest.
That's right.
Welcome, Henry.
Henry, nice to have you with us. Would Keefe, Bruyette & Woods recommend certain savings and loans as investments for people right now?
Yes. We have consistently recommended some S&Ls.
And
I was going to say it's pretty tough in light of some of the information we've just had from our two guests to dive into the fray.
Remember that they have indicated that only 1/3 of the industry is sick. The other 2/3 are from moderately healthy to very healthy.
It would seem to me if I was a healthy S&L with a fair amount of cash in my kicker that I've got a whole bunch of places I can go with that. But I have to be careful, don't I?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so do investors. And that's the key.
I see a look of warning. I'm looking at this man's eyes here.
What would you tell investors to pay particular attention to in their analyzation of a savings and loan or a bank stock before purchase?
Well, it depends why people invest. I think one factor that's involved that people ought to recognize is that savings and loan stocks are volatile. They vary, their prices vary with interest rate movements.
Very interest rate sensitive.
Yes. Yeah. And they continue to be, although they are less sensitive now than they were some years ago. They fluctuate in relationship to housing activity, because that's basically how thrifts make their money.
Let's talk for a second, Henry, about that, if you would. Primary businesses of thrifts, right at the top. I think the reason why they were formed in the first place is to help the housing market.
Absolutely.
Lending mortgages. What else? All these banks didn't get into trouble by making mortgages to good people who made their mortgage payments.
Well, the problem is that under deregulation in 1980 and 1981, they were given the option of expanding their lending, going into commercial real estate, expanding in construction lending, which is more risky than the kinds of single-family home loans that they make, going into land development.
Well, it didn't take them long to get into trouble,
did they go?
Because Henry, Bert Ely a while ago said by 1984, definitely 85, he could see that there were big problems there as someone who's a consultant to the industry. So what did it take them? 4 years? 3 years?
In some cases, even less than that. See, one of the problems is they had to put together people that knew how to make these sorts of loans, and some of them didn't do it. In New England, for example, there have been a number of savings and loans or savings banks that have gotten into very real trouble because they got into construction lending without anybody on staff that really knew how to make construction loans. By the same token, there are other thrifts. One of them, for example, is Home Fed of San Diego, that has been in the construction lending and the real estate development business for many years and has been consistently profitable.
It's done well.
Now,
so you can't generalize by saying.
You can't generalize. But there's another aspect of this. Home Fed, a few years ago, got into the credit card business. And they lost their shirts. So what you learn in one side of the business doesn't necessarily apply to another side.
Profits, Henry. You were grinding some numbers as we were doing a little dabbing here, a little makeup of our Wall Street. We don't want our Wall Street friends to know we have this stuff on. How does it look for the first quarter or two of 1989?
Well,
as a group, Henry.
For the industry as a whole, the numbers are terrible. In the first quarter of the year, in the March quarter of the year, the industry as a whole lost $3.5 billion after all was said and done. And it increased to $3.9 billion in the second quarter of the year.
I don't know if I want to get into this business, Henry.
But remember that a lot of those losses came from a relatively small number of thrifts that are, to all intents and purposes, dead.
Out of business, yeah. And so
in the June quarter, even though the industry as a whole lost close to $4 billion, 2/3 of the industry was profitable. Unfortunately, the third that was unprofitable more than wiped out the profits of the profitable group.
All right, we're going to take a couple of questions. We have a very nice gentleman by the name of Robert who's been hanging on from Raleigh, North Carolina since the start of the show. Hi, Robert.
Yes. My question is, what is the potential gain from a particular, or the mutual funds that are coming out now that are in the Southeast? I'm really curious about these new mutual funds that are going to consist of 30 to 40 supposedly healthy savings and loans.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. I can't think of the name of the organization that's doing it right now.
Southeastern Savings Fund, something like that?
Exactly, and it is a mutual fund made up of savings and loans.
Yay,
I'll
Wall Street, package.
I just read it yesterday.
All right, now I think one of the prime motivating factors behind the formation of funds like this.
Johnson Lane, that's who's bringing
Johnson
it out.
Lane. One of the prime factors behind bringing out a fund like this is that a lot of people expect, as I do, that these thrifts, the healthy ones, the well-run ones, are going to be bought up by commercial banks or by other institutions. And if they are bought up, they will be bought up at a premium to current market price. That provides the profit potential for a fund which invests in a group of thrifts. It's something that an individual investor can do, but it's much more difficult. First of all, few individual investors have enough money to put together a package.
To diversify.
And the package is probably the best way to buy.
If I'm going to put my foot in the water, we've only got a minute left or so, Henry, I'm going to put my little pinky in the water in the S&L business for a stock. Can we pin you down for an idea or two?
Well,
or even a geographical area?
All right. I'd like to just start by saying a couple of general characteristics that you ought to look for. Number one, you want management.
Okay.
And the way you get management is you look at the earnings record. You want a company that's profitable.
Well said.
You want a company that does not have too much in the way of problem assets. You want a company that does not have too much in the way of goodwill, because right now that's a no-no.
Well said.
Okay. All right, now having said that, we have a number of stocks that we have been recommending to our institutional clients. We don't do a retail
Much
business.
retail.
Sure.
I'll give you some names.
If you just give us one or two, then we're going to have to...
All right, Great Lakes Bancorp in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Apple Bank here in New York. Union Fed in Los Angeles. San Francisco Fed. I'm not going to tell you where that's located.
I think we figured that
Henry,
one
thank
out.
you very much. As we do with the other two gentlemen, come on back again toward the end of the year, and let's take a peek at the future for 1990. Will you come back?
Will do.
Good deal. Speaking of back, we'll be back with Phones Across America in just a minute.
If you're taking the SAT, Stanley H. Kaplan would like to remind you what to bring. First, you'll need a pencil to fill in your answers, an eraser to change your mistakes, something sweet for energy, even a watch to keep track of time. And if you haven't taken a Stanley H. Kaplan SAT prep course, you may need to bring along one of these. Kaplan has produced more top scores than anyone else. Call 800-321-6200 for a free introductory lesson. Stanley H. Kaplan. Take Kaplan or take your chances.
Sherry Haynes is getting ready to go to her family reunion. Everyone is waiting for her there. They're all gathered together. For Sherry's family reunion, she doesn't have to worry about bringing any gifts. It doesn't even matter if she's late. For Sherry, because of a drunk driver, family reunions will never be the same.
Now, watch how slow and smooth I take the club back and then accelerate through the ball.
Slipped more than 3 to 828 and a fraction. Utilities lost a point to 208 and a quarter. The retreat was broad-based with losers. The S&P fell 1.5 points to 3. The strength in secondary issues, while the deposit gained more than 2/3 of a point.
The credit markets were buffeted by cross-currents yesterday. Consumer spending and income were relatively flat, indicating a weak economy, good news for bonds. But then the Commerce Department reported a smaller than expected number of new claims for unemployment benefits, and that indicated less weakness than expected. The result, mostly unchanged corporate issues, tax-free slipping a 16th. Long-term government, however, it dropped a half a point, which is a pretty good move. The yield now at 8.49%. Fed funds rate closed at 7 9/16%.
The FDIC is running out of money. Federal banking officials say the fund used to insure deposits at banks and S&Ls will run out of money if institutions continue to go under because of the weak economy. One solution proposed this week is to beef up the fund by requiring banks to buy stock in the FDIC. Our guest this first half hour of World Business is Henry Peltz, a banking industry analyst. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail.
Just how serious is this problem with the FDIC insurance fund?
Well, according to Mr. Seidman, the head of the FDIC, they can get through unless there is a recession. If there is a recession, a severe recession, then the fund could shrink further and cause somewhat the same kind of thing that happened with the savings and loans and the FSLIC fund.
In your opinion, are we headed down that track? The apparently White House officials and administration folks are the only ones not using the recession word right now. So let's say we're in a recession. Is it deep enough, or do you see it getting serious enough to wipe out the FDIC fund?
Well, part of the answer to that will depend on how strict the regulators are in dealing with banks and other financial institutions. If they continue to take a hard line, there could be some major banks go under, which would have a negative effect on the FDIC fund. Clearly, we are in a business downturn, a recession. One doesn't know how long it will last or how severe it will be. A severe recession clearly would trigger considerable further pressure on the FDIC fund and could cause very serious repercussions.
Henry, how can I wonder if you could explain briefly how the regulators can make a difference here. If a bank's in trouble, a bank's in trouble. Why would the strictness of the regulators make a difference?
Well, for example, if the regulators take a very hard line in terms of classifying real estate loans or other kinds of loans and require banks to set up reserves, further reserves, this in turn would reduce their capital. If it reduces their capital, then conceivably the bank might be judged to have failed and be required to be taken over by the regulators, by the FDIC.
Absent the strict regulation, and given more time, things might work out and it might never come to a crisis.
Exactly. Time is a key element.
What about this proposal to buy preferred stock in the FDIC? Is that a good idea?
It may be a necessary idea, depending on how serious things get.
Why don't they just require banks to put up more toward the insurance fund and just say this is exactly what it's for? Why go through the back door and buy preferred stock?
Because preferred stock will pay a dividend, will provide a better return than simply putting in capital to the FDIC.
Okay, we'll get into this problem a little more in our next half hour. Thanks a lot. Our guest has been Henry Peltz, a savings and loan analyst and also an analyst with the banking industry. It's right now 18 past the hour. Mark and I will be right back. Stay there.
You're watching CNBC.
Freedom is all that matters. Freedom is everything.
There's a new light shining over Eastern Europe.
The Hungarians are waiting for a very long time.
A light of hope, joy, and most of all, a new light of freedom.
Everything is changing. It's wonderful.
It's a miracle.
I'm so happy.
And in this spirit, GE has entered into an historic partnership with a company called Tungsram, Hungary's leading lighting company.
Freedom is something that you have to work for very hard.
It's like a dream, a beautiful dream.
At GE, we're proud to play even a small part in helping the Hungarian people build what promises to be a truly brilliant future.
Overcome near fatal blows. In the greatest fourth quarter comeback in NFL history, Minnesota scored 4 touchdowns in the final 8 minutes to beat Philadelphia in 1985. It was that same tenacity that enabled the great teams to come out victorious during the classic playoff matchups. The 1967 championship game known as the Ice Bowl between Green Bay and Dallas. The drive Denver used to beat Cleveland in the 1986 championship game. Or the catch the 49ers' Dwight Clark made to beat Dallas in 1981's championship are just some of the fantastic finishes you're about to see and never forget.
DC, a nonprofit program of help hospitalized veterans serving American soldiers for over 20 years.
There's rejoicing in Sofia in this morning's Worldview. Jubilant Bulgarians sang and danced in the streets after the prime minister bowed to pressure and resigned. It was a victory for hundreds of thousands of workers who had been on general strike demanding a multi-party government to replace the socialist regime. They also protested declining living conditions and shortages of food and fuel. The reformed communist prime minister Andrei Lukaku forming a new government. The first load of German food aid for the Soviets is being distributed in Moscow today. A plane load arrived last night. 25,000 unpacked to children's hospitals and orphanages immediately so they could not be stolen or left to rot. Food supplies have been spotty because of distribution problems rather than actual shortages. Finally, international financial executives think world markets will come of age in the next 5 years, boosted by expanding American investment overseas. More than 600 executives were surveyed for a subsidiary of the California bank holding company Security Pacific. They say that despite the increasing foreign investment by American corporations and individuals, London has already eclipsed New York as the world's financial center. It also predicts as Eastern Europe turns to free market economies, Frankfurt, Germany is likely to become much more important. That's Worldview for now. Mark has commodities news from this side of the Atlantic. Mark?
All right, thank you, Gail. It is getting to the point where you have to have a degree in international politics to understand the grain markets or to make any money in them. December corn jumped 4.5 cents to $2.25 a bushel on word from a U.S. official traveling with the president that he may soon grant export credits to the Soviets. Soybeans got an even bigger boost on rumors of shots being fired in the Persian Gulf. January beans up 8.25 cents to $5.94 3/4 a bushel, even though those rumors, of course, were not true. Wheat, however, did not benefit. Apparently because traders now figure the Canadians are going to get most of the Soviet wheat business. Canada has been much more aggressive than the U.S. in wooing the Kremlin grain buyers. December wheat fell 3 3/4 to $2.39 a bushel. December CRB index edged down 0.65 to 225.35. Merger talks between the American Stock Exchange and the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. Philadelphia's chairman, Barry Teague, says talks are scheduled for December 7th. Teague also says Philadelphia has received inquiries about a possible merger from the Chicago Board Options Exchange, but that so far no talks on that are planned. Talks between the Amex and Philadelphia broke off 2 years ago, but this fall, Philadelphia formed a committee to review possible business combinations. Yep.
Well, Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady will meet today with securities industry representatives gathered in Florida. The group's call for a Washington financial summit is getting mixed reaction. But as CNBC's Neil Cavuto reports, Secretary Brady is expected to lend a sympathetic ear.
As bigwig meetings go, the settings don't get much more idyllic than this. But beneath the plush palm trees and well-manicured lawns of this swanky Florida resort club, there are some nervous folks. Very nervous. Securities industries officials gathering for this year's conference are looking at some very tough times. Already, profits have been pared to the bone, averaging barely $100 million a month. That's a far cry from the better than $700 million the industry was raking in the mid-1980s. And it's also reason enough why so many brokerage houses aren't even sending representatives to this year's conference. Still, industry chieftains talk of better times ahead.
There may be some cutbacks. There probably will be a few more. We come to the end of the year, there normally has been years of difficulty, and this is no exception. But my guess is it will not be extreme.
But for the time being, the numbers don't look good. Consider the near tumble between second and third quarter earnings. At industry giant Merrill Lynch, per share earnings 64 cents in the second quarter, 38 cents in the third. At Payne Weber, 35 cents in the second quarter, 15 cents in the third. At Solomon Brothers, a collapse from 87 cents in the second quarter to 54 cents 3 months later. It's nearly in half, from 32 cents to 17 cents in the latest report. Even for those with a wealthy corporate parent like Prudential Base's George Ball, the pressures are obvious.
But Mr. Ball, was that under pressure from your parent company to do something about this?
No.
So they didn't tell you that unless you did something, your job would be in jeopardy?
No, absolutely not, no.
So are they still standing behind you? Do they still say that we're behind George Ball?
Yes, they have all the way, and there's been no intimation ever to the contrary.
No pressure, in other words, on earnings that if you don't turn things around soon, you could be in serious trouble?
I would hope, like everybody in the securities industry, that we can do better in the 90s than in the 80s. But the Prudential is firmly committed, as Bob Litter said the other day, to prudential-based securities into George Ball.
No mystery then, security officials here were praising Mishusta's recent purchase of MCA. Some were smelling deals again.
I think that the charges will continue to go on. They will be done when we go for both sides. This is a free society.
On the standout conference, the popular collection of foreign market warrant contracts to weather the tough times.
Could I read in between the lines and slap me if I'm wrong that you have poo-pooed talks of any merger between yourself and the big board?
Well, right now I don't think that's practical to look at. What happens in the future is speculative.
But you're not beyond thinking of it.
No, I think anything is on the table.
In fact, rumors of mergers and takeovers were about the only thing keeping these folks going. As one put it, it's fun gossip, and we could use the fun. In Boca Raton, Florida, Neil Cavuto, CNBC.
The NCAA makes a controversial call in Sports View this morning. The organization yesterday settled its 13-year-old case against Jerry Tarkanian. He's the coach of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Runnin' Rebels. UNLV President Bob Maxson says it is finally over.
This is the conclusion. This is it. There's no more litigation. All the court rulings, those sorts of things now are history. This ends the litigation between the coach, this institution, and the NCAA.
Litigation went back to 1977, excuse me, when Tarkanian was accused of illegal recruiting practices. After a full court press, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Rebels will be allowed to defend their national basketball championship this year. In exchange, the team will not compete in 1991-92 postseason play and will be banned from live television during the season. The NCAA's action has Kansas fans crying foul. University of Kansas denied the chance to defend their title in 1988 when they were penalized for recruiting violations as well. So a little complaint there of unequal treatment.
Not to go ignored, I'm sure. Consumers dig in, the economy goes down. In our next half hour on World Business, more evidence of a recession.
Also ahead is gold, still a good bet. A surprising answer from our Dan Dorfman.
Plus, the big depositors at New York's failed Freedom National Bank, what the FDIC will do for them.
And if you were hoping for lower prices at the pumps, gas again. The new federal gasoline tax is about to go into effect. Prices are going up again, folks. 28 and a half past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're watching CNBC, Consumer News and Business Channel.
It was a sinus as well as a head cold.
Lead weights in my face, all through here. It eventually gets in my head. It felt like a clogged drain.
It was time to go down with a cold.
Last year, 7 million people discovered Coadvil.
Coadvil just cleared everything up.
It was like the lead weights had just gone away.
My sinuses were clear.
The headache was gone.
I was not drowsy with Coadvil at all.
Try Coadvil, and the next cold won't seem so bad.
Coadvil, advanced formula for cold and sinus relief.
The Chevy Corsica has better aerodynamics than a Porsche 928 and a gas-charged independent front suspension, which helps you hold the road. Corsica also has a new user-friendly interior, which helps you hold the most important things. It's a very comforting way more people are winning with.
The heartbeat of America, that's today's Chevrolet.
And now it's easy to win with an efficient new Chevy Corsica.
Here's an opportunity to receive a free copy of William F. Buckley's historic Agenda for the 90s.
When you get National Review, you'll have news and opinions you don't find anywhere else.
But I think you know that National Review is my favorite magazine. It's my favorite because it's splendidly written, brilliantly edited, and a pleasure to read.
It's informative, probing, persuasive, and challenging. It's serious, and it's entertaining. I think it's terrific.
I like it because it cuts through the nonsense that normally surrounds most political issues with simple, common sense. And, of course, I love the humor. It's a very funny magazine.
Yep, no other magazine gives you what we give you, guaranteed.
Call this toll-free number now, and we'll send you absolutely free and with no obligation this copy of Agenda for the 90s. For a trial subscription to National Review for only $24.95, call toll-free 1-800-851-1400. That's 1-800-851-1400.
The Great Recession debate rolls on. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Haynes.
And I'm Gail Buckner. And this time, an adage with a twist. What's bad for the country is bad for General Motors. Later this morning, more numbers to help determine whether we are in a recession or not. Government's index of leading indicators is due about 2 hours from now. The LPI is lagging in forecasting a recession that has already begun. Latest example, General Motors blaming a slowing economy and says it will cut back production even further this quarter, reducing output by 111,000 more vehicles. That's on top of previously announced reductions and means GM is cutting back fourth quarter production by nearly 300,000 units. Even still, GM officials are warning profits will show a significant decline and possibly a loss for the fourth quarter. Sales are not only down at GM, Americans have cut back on all spending. Consumer spending froze in its tracks in October, sticking at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of $3.73 trillion. This is personal income inched just 0.1% higher. That is down from a 0.4% gain the previous month.
An international agency that works to promote the global economy reports the United States is not in a recession. It is at a standstill. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, says the American economy is approaching zero growth. America's representative to the council says higher oil prices are forcing consumers to tighten their purse strings.
There's going to be more money spent on heating oil, therefore less to spend on other goods. That will tend to take its toll on the economy. I think it will be much more mild than we saw in the 1970s, but we're beginning to see that at this point now.
Now, a key factor in the OECD's economic scenario is oil prices. The annual study model was built using a fixed price of oil at $27 a barrel.
Oil prices anything but fixed yesterday as traders awaited the UN vote on use of force against Iraq. Prices were volatile because of conflicting rumors out of the Middle East. They fell in the last minutes of trading as investors sold off oil that would have lost value had the resolution been rejected. But the Security Council voted last night 12-2, with China abstaining, to set a January 15th deadline for the Iraqi president to order his forces withdrawn from Kuwait. Addressing a bankers' convention earlier, President Bush said the U.S. and other countries opposed Iraqi aggression, not just for economic reasons.
There's a moral underpinning to what we're doing. To me, it is very, very clear, and I don't intend to waver one single bit.
The U.S. benchmark light sweet crude closed down 37 cents in New York yesterday at $32.91, this before the vote was in. In London this morning, Brent North Sea crude is trading for $32 a barrel even, and surprisingly, that is down 39 cents a barrel.
Dollar staging a comeback on foreign exchanges for quite some time now, and it's continuing in the wake of that UN Security Council vote. However, the dollar is beginning to slip back a bit as dealers square their positions ahead of the weekend. CNBC's Shelley Carabell has details on the greenback's performance, and to look at other financial news overseas, we join her in our London bureau. Good morning again, Shelley.
Good morning, Mark. The dollar shot up just after the UN Security Council vote, but has now dropped back since the European Open. Dealers appear to be concerned more with squaring their positions before the weekend and will hold off until and unless there is actual fighting in the Gulf before making any major moves. Right now, the dollar is up nearly 2/3 of a cent against the British pound at $1.9375. Against the Deutsche mark, it's down a fraction at 150.47. And against the Japanese currency, the greenback is down 3/4 of a yen at 132.75. These numbers are compared to the New York close. Against the London close last night, the dollar was up significantly. For example, it's some 2 cents higher against the British pound. Gold prices have also come back down in profit-taking after peaking yesterday following the Security Council vote. The London spot bid now $384.40 an ounce. That's down $4.50 from the New York close. The credit markets are quiet now that all the attention is in the short term. The U.S. Treasury's long bond selling for 102 and 24 seconds. That's up 2 ticks from the New York close, yielding 8.49%. Here in Britain, the morning papers are full of news about the new Prime Minister's first full day of work in his new job. John Major answered questions to the Prime Minister in the House of Commons, trying to diffuse criticism levied at him for choosing an all-male cabinet and telling MPs he didn't like the idea of a single European currency. The consensus is that Major's tone is a little less strident than Mrs. Thatcher's was. And last night, in a speech to Conservatives in Northern England, Major said he wanted Britain to play a leadership role in Europe, using a sports metaphor, not unlike his predecessor. Major said that Britain can't influence Europe's future from the terraces, meaning the grandstand. Well, Major also says he believes Britain is about to turn the corner on inflation, which is now running at just under 11%, and that he's confident that the money supply here is under control. Equity traders apparently believe him. They've turned their backs on yesterday's fears of fighting in the Gulf, despite the UN Security Council vote setting a deadline for the use of force. Many dealers now squaring their positions ahead of the weekend, and they like what they've been hearing from the new inhabitant of number 10 Downing Street. And that has pushed the Financial Times 100 index up 5.2 at 2140.8. 170 million shares have changed hands. The FTSE Eurotrack index of 100 leading European stocks is up 5.63 at 956.56. In Frankfurt, dealers are in a buying mood ahead of Sunday's elections, the first pan-German election since before World War II. That's pushed the DAX index up 17 points to stand at 1435.92. And finally, a U.S. federal grand jury indicted 12 men for theft and the sale of $557 million worth of securities, most of it stolen from a messenger at knife point in London. The robbery here was the biggest in British history, and brokerage houses of well, let's see. It scared brokerage houses out of their 200-year-old method of hand-delivering negotiable securities in favor of a computerized method. You can't burglarize a computer, apparently. The men were also allegedly involved in theft of $7 million in securities in New York in a complex international scheme. Well, Mark and Gail, that's it from us for the time being. We'll have more market news from Europe for you in about 45 minutes.
All right, Shelley, thank you. Shelley Carabo, reporting live from our London bureau.
Japan declared its full support today for the UN force resolution against Iraq, but the measure helped drive share prices and the Japanese currency lower. In Tokyo, the Nikkei lost nearly 258 points on increased war worries, a little more than 1% of its value. It closed today at 22,454. The yen took a tumble against the dollar. It is considered especially vulnerable to petroleum price hikes since Japan imports virtually all of its oil. The dollar brought 132.75 yen at today's closing, up to 65 yen.
T. Boone Pickens fighting back. So far, he's had no luck in his fight for a seat on the board, of Japan's Koito Manufacturing. So now, Pickens says he is forming a group to study the practices of Japanese companies doing business in the U.S. He's calling on union and business leaders in the Midwest, where Honda and Toyota have plants, to evaluate foreign investment in America's heartland. Pickens is Koito's largest shareholder. He owns 26% of the auto parts manufacturer.
Americans can get ready for higher taxes tomorrow, among them higher prices that you cannot blame on Saddam Hussein. The new nickel-a-gallon gas tax goes into effect. The price of air travel is on the rise as well. The tax on flying and shipping by air will jump 25%. From 8 to 10%. The increases are part of the budget agreement worked out last month and are aimed at helping the government cut the federal deficit by some $500 billion over the next 5 years.
Federal regulators are proposing that savings and loan institutions be allowed to convert to state-chartered savings banks. The recommendation comes from the FDIC. It has the backing of the S&L industry. Of course, it would further blur the lines between different types of savings institutions. But regulators are split over whether the change would allow financially sick S&Ls to sidestep government lending restrictions. The FDIC will pay depositors at the bankrupt Freedom National Bank 50 cents on the dollar for all monies in excess of $100,000 they kept in the bank. Usually, of course, the FDIC covers amounts up to $100,000. The Harlem Bank was one of the nation's largest black-owned financial institutions. It was closed earlier this month after it failed to meet capital reserve requirements imposed by the federal regulators.
The former chairman of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board ended his third day on the witness stand in the Keating 5 investigation with strong testimony.
The influence of the thrift lobby killed all of the reforms that we sought. In fact, I know that from the time I became chairman of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. Every single piece of legislation that we submitted to the House and Senate banking committees was killed by the thrift lobby.
Edwin Gray is considered a key witness in the Senate Ethics Committee probe into the conduct of 5 senators on behalf of Charles Keating. The former head of the failed Lincoln Savings and Loan contributed heavily to the senators' campaigns and other causes. Gray and a former S&L investigator both singled out Arizona Senator Dennis DeConcini as negotiating for Keating, trying harder than the other 4 senators to win their support for Lincoln.
A new chapter in that bitter strike against the New York Daily News. The paper has now filed a $600 million lawsuit against its striking drivers union, accusing members of carrying out an orchestrated campaign of violence, the charge racketeering. The News also wants a court order barring strikers from engaging in any more acts of violence.
watching CNBC.
Ask our troops in Saudi Arabia what bothers them the most about being there, and they'll tell you it's not Saddam Hussein, it's being 6,000 miles from home, and the fear the longer they're there, the less we'll care. Well, there's no better time than now to tell them we care by sending one of our brave men or women a GI gift pack, brimming with delicious candies and dried fruits, tasty nuts, cookies, and other treats. GI gift packs are non-profit, tax-deductible. Just $15 sends one, 25 sends two. Call 1-800-755-GIFT. We'll even put your name and address on a greeting card. I'm asking every American family to send at least one gift pack. Let's tell them we care. Here's how to order.
Have your credit card ready and call toll-free 1-800-755-GIFT. That's 1-800-755-GIFT. Or send $15 for one gift pack, $25 for two gift packs. Box 91560, Washington, D.C. A non-profit program of Help Hospitalized Veterans serving American soldiers for over 20 years.
Protect your treasured dining room tabletop from burns, hot serving dishes, scratches, and stains with a custom table pad. These deluxe table pads are from the #1 maker of table pads in the country. Factory Direct Table Pad Company has been protecting fine dining room tables like yours for years. And by ordering your table pad direct from the factory, your cost is as low as $29.95. Compare that to identical pads costing $100 or more. How did they do it? By eliminating the high markup charged by retail stores. Order your pad direct from the factory and save up to 70% off the retail price. All pads are fully insulated with soft cotton felt bottoms and are available in almost any wood grain or solid color. They fold for easy storage, are guaranteed to fit any shaped table, and carry a factory guarantee of up to 20 years. Don't risk damage to your table another day. Protect it forever and add a touch of elegance with a custom table pad starting from only $29.95.
Call now and receive absolutely free this information and sample kit showing you how to order your custom table pad factory direct. Call 1-800-253-2300. Factory Direct Table Pad Company can protect your dining room table for up to 70% off. Call now, 1-800-253-2300.
17 minutes before the hour on World Business. Weakness in bonds tripped up the stock market yesterday. The Dow losing 16 1/3, but volume remained meaningless, and losers outnumbered winners by only 4-3. Among our story stocks this morning, Shearson Lehman said yesterday that across-the-board price cutting could take a bite out of McDonald's profits. Traders nibbled 1 1/8 off the stock to 28 even. McDonnell Douglas fell 2 7/8 to 43 3/4. The Wall Street Journal reported yesterday the Air Force says the company is way over budget on a cargo plane contract. Overrun could be more than $500 million, and under the terms of the contract, McDonnell Douglas would have to eat that. First Boston upgraded CBS from a hold to a buy yesterday. They must have read the Wall Street Journal report that the company may start a stock buyback program. Still no announcement to that effect, by the way, from the company, but the stock shot up another 4 7/8 to 165 3/4. Day's big loser on the big board was Nashua, the office supply firm, paper people. Company said its fourth quarter earnings will be lower than the street expects. Street lowered the boom. Stock plunged 8 3/8 to 30 1/8. And finally, Johnson & Johnson crept ahead by 7/8 to 67 7/8. Donaldson Lufkin repeated a buy recommendation, and Goldman Sachs upgraded the stock to attractive.
Child World will remain an orphan for the time being. Investment partnership Trefoil Capital Investors says it has dropped its plans to buy the nation's second-largest toy retailer. No reason given for scrubbing the deal. The announcement came 1 week after Trefoil said it planned to buy 82% of Child World for an undisclosed price. It also came after the market closed yesterday. Child World shares were down 1/2 at 3.5. The world's biggest soft drink company and the world's largest food company have cooked up a joint venture to blend new beverages. Coca-Cola and Nestle will each contribute $50 million to produce ready-to-drink coffee and teas. One industry analyst thinks the marriage combines the best resources of both companies.
The concentrate business, or the flavoring business, and that's essentially what this is, just another flavoring business, as is Coca-Cola or orange soda or anything else, is really not very capital intensive. And all the capital intensity in the business is basically in the distribution, which Coca-Cola already has in place.
A spokesperson for Coke says it is too early to say what new products will come out of the venture. Coke lost 3/4 of a point yesterday to close at 44 3/4.
In times of crisis, many investors head for gold as a safe haven investment. At least they did in the past. But that ancient wisdom seems to be off the mark this time. CNBC's financial correspondent Dan Dorfman tells us why.
You know, gold was a bumper for me yesterday, and this despite all the tensions in the Persian Gulf. What's wrong? For what's wrong with gold, it was only up roughly $3 yesterday an ounce. For what's wrong, let's talk to Peter Cardello, who heads commodity research at Joseph Thorne. Here's what he says is wrong with gold. Number one, falling commodity prices. We could be heading for deflation, heavy Russian sales of gold, as the largest producer of gold in the world, skidding oil prices. Guess what happens? The Persian Gulf crisis ends. Too much oversupply and a cutback in luxury spending because of a falling economy. Let's look at how gold prices fared yesterday, and what we're looking at is fool's gold. We see Homestake, Vermont Mining, Placid Dome, Battle Mountain Gold, Echo Bay Mines, American Barrick, ASA. In other words, gold was no big deal. You should still keep about 5% for yourself just in case the world caves in, which it won't. But anyway, gold for now looks like fool's gold. I'm Dan Dorfman for CNBC.
You're watching CNBC, the Consumer News and Business Channel.
This incredible stereo component system can be yours free from U.S. News and World Report. That's right, a free stereo. In a moment, you'll find out more.
Movie stars on the cover of Time. Cartoons on the cover of Newsweek. At U.S. News and World Report, how to build your fortune. Entertainment news or news you can use? Which is important? Let's hear what some readers have to say.
It compared a few different approaches to investing and let me choose.
And I pick out a few things in finance, and I think I've made some right financial moves as a result of it.
Best jobs for the future.
If we make a move, should we rent? Should we buy? Should we stay where we are? Should we try to improve the place?
Those kind of things are important to me right now in my life.
I say U.S. News gives you an insight into what might be tomorrow.
If you call right now, you'll receive this exclusive stereo component system absolutely free. This custom-engineered audio system features twin dynamic speakers for pure stereo sound, precision AM/FM radio tuner, and an LCD quartz alarm clock with snooze bar. And it's yours free with your paid subscription.
A stereo sounds fantastic.
Call now, and you'll also get great savings. Over 60% off the cover price. You'll get 36 weekly issues, including exclusive annual guides like these. Pay in just 4 easy installments of $6.89, or use your credit card.
That is big savings.
Take it home, drive it around the block, kick the tires, and if you don't like it, send it back to us and we'll give you your money back.
A great magazine. Great savings. Annual guides. A money-back guarantee, and the stereo is yours free.
That's a very good deal. It makes perfect sense to subscribe.
I take the subscription and the stereo.
So pick up the phone and call right now.
Call now. 1-800-242-3600.
Back with us this half hour, Henry Peltz, a banking analyst. Peltz says that banks are not necessarily crazy about the FDIC's idea to recapitalize the agency by having the banks buy FDIC stock. Welcome back. Good morning.
Good morning.
On the issue of the FDIC stock, does this sound like a good idea to the banks? I mean, the people that you've talked to, are they saying, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable way to pump more money into this fund?
Well, I think people generally, banks generally, are unhappy at the concept of the FDIC fund needing to be bolstered. Perhaps the use of preferred stock is a more acceptable way of trying to bolster that fund.
More acceptable than raising the premium? Or
raising the premium or reducing the dividend, as has happened in the savings and loan industry, where the Federal Home Loan banks have had to cut their dividends. See, at least with a preferred stock, you will be getting a return. Now, of course, they can always reduce the dividend on the preferred stock at some time. But you not only will get a return, but that preferred stock may well be counted as part of your capital.
Let's talk about the capital requirements and the reserve requirements and proposals to change both of those. How would that affect banks?
Well, there is now going to be a so-called risk weighting on a bank's risk weighting requirement for capital. What that will do will be to assign a risk weighting, as now happens for the savings and loan industry, on a bank's assets. The higher the risk, after all of these assets are added up, the higher the capital requirement.
So junk bonds, risky real estate loans, they would get
a high risk weighting. Government bonds would get a very low risk weighting.
Now, at the same time, the Fed has floated, I don't know, what appears to be maybe a trial balloon about lowering the reserve requirement to get banks to loosen up their lending practices. Obviously, if they have to keep less in reserve, they can loan more.
Right.
The question that has arisen with regard to that is, if the banks are really scared about the future and are conserving their own capital, creating cushions, are they going to lend more even if the reserve requirement's lower?
There are those who say that perhaps they will not. It's very hard to figure out what will happen for 13,000 banks in the United States, or even the largest 100, 200, 300 banks in the United States, based on an action by the Federal Reserve like this.
Would it be safe to say, excuse me, that the healthy ones, J.P. Morgan, for example, probably would lend out more because they're in good shape, but say a Chase or a Chemical would probably not?
That, I think, is probably a fair assumption.
How do you think this is going to fly with regulators? There's a push on to allow federal S&Ls to switch over to state-chartered institutions. Isn't that what got savings banks, right? Isn't that what got S&Ls in California in trouble to begin with, because the state regulations are far less stringent than the federal ones?
Yes, but consider that if you're going to switch over from a savings and loan charter to a savings bank charter, you're not going to be allowed to do that unless you have a very healthy capital ratio to begin with. So they can limit people switching over from savings and loan charter to a savings bank charter by requiring a very high capital requirement.
But what's the advantage to the S&L to become then a state-chartered savings bank?
They are able to get out from under the Office of Thrift Supervision.
Exactly.
And what that means is that instead of 2 or 3 layers of regulation, they only have 1 or 2. And a good deal of the problems in the financial services industry, particularly the savings and loans, has been a proliferation of regulatory agencies which has caused turf wars, contradictions, and general unhappiness.
It's always expensive to deal with regulations. We thank you. We're out of time. Our guest this morning, savings and loan and banking industry analyst Henry Peltz. It's 6 before the hour. Gail and I will be right back. Stay there.
Financial future with Express. 800-7PC News.
Ziploc presents Fingerman. Hi, I'm here to demonstrate the Gripper Zipper from Ziploc. Now the easiest closing bag there is. In fact, you can close it even if you're all thumbs. How you doing? Yes, the zipper is grabbing hold. It's locking. Feel it close the first time, every time. Yeah. Ziploc bags with the Gripper Zipper. The easiest closing bag there is. Now that was a snap.
Monday, September 23rd, the most spectacular opening night ever on television.
Football.
With heroes,
Heroes?
rogues,
Wrestling?
fashion,
Oprah.
romance,
Say those again.
rogues, heroes, romance, comedy, passion. Live on pay-per-view, Panasonic presents the 25th anniversary gala at the Met.
Yes, opera.
Only on pay-per-view cable TV. Call your cable system for details. Here's an opportunity to receive a free copy of William F. Buckley's historic Agenda for the 90s.
Hi, I'm Bill Buckley. You may know me through my television show, Firing Line, or my newspaper columns, or maybe one of my Blackfoot Oaks spy novels. But you ought to know about my magazine, National Review. A National Review gives you insights into current events and information about important issues from a decidedly different set of priorities. It gives you a point of view that may very well be like your own.
I like it because it cuts through the nonsense that normally surrounds most political issues with simple, common sense. And of course, I love the humor. It's a very funny magazine.
When you get National Review, you'll have news and opinion you can't find anywhere else. You can't find National Review on every newsstand, so this may be your only chance to get a copy.
Call this toll-free number now, and we'll send you absolutely free Agenda for the 90s. For a trial subscription to National Review, call 1-800-851-1400. That's 1-800-851-1400.
Government resigns in this morning's Worldview. Poland's prime minister shocked parliament today by announcing his solidarity government will step down in the wake of sharp criticism over 1991 budget cuts. Those cuts were the result of a serious recession that had slashed government income. Cuba's official newspaper is warning that the crisis in the Soviet Union will mean harder times in Havana, but it issued an emotional vow that Cuba will remain communist. The Soviet Union has long been Cuba's main supporter, but the collapse of communism has Cuba bracing for drastic cuts in aid from Moscow. The paper also put much of the blame on the, quote, inhuman economic blockade by the United States and its sick hatred toward the Cuban revolution, end quote. China's president now says he's willing to discuss strengthening economic ties with Mongolia and the Soviet Union. He made his comments at the end of a 4-day trip to the Mongolian capital. Mongolia can use all the help it can get, since its economy has been shattered by the withdrawal of Soviet aid. Until last year, Mongolia was a satellite of Moscow for more than 70 years. Pakistan has been hit with another financial scam that sounds like BCCI all over again. It centers on financial cooperatives set up to provide investment opportunities and loans to low-income Pakistanis who would not qualify at commercial banks. But when investigators started probing allegations of money laundering, mismanagement, and smuggling, dozens of the co-ops bolted doors and took off with hundreds of millions. And that's Worldview. Now back to Mark at the news desk.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Ousted Centrust Chairman David Paul facing new stiff fines. Federal S&L regulators fined Paul $3.2 million yesterday for disobeying orders to freeze his assets and live on a budget. Regulators want Paul to pay $31 million in restitution. He is accused of diverting millions from Centrust accounts to fund a lavish lifestyle. He has until September 20th to pay up, but of course, he can always appeal. Some of the investors who bought bonds at Lincoln Savings and Loan had their day in court yesterday. An 80-year-old man who lost over $100,000 buying a junk bond at Lincoln Savings testified at Charles Keating's trial. Keating is the former head of the failed thrift. The investor, Leon Bonin, says he thought the investment was insured like a CD, but he acknowledged that he failed to read the prospectus before making his purchase following a 15-minute sales pitch. The former general counsel of New Jersey's Polyfly Financial has been ordered to pay the Office of Thrift Supervision $6 million. OTS says Robert Hartman and his wife gave, quote, false and misleading statements and produced fraudulent documents about their partial ownership of Changership East. That company borrowed more than $26 million from Polyfly. Polyfly has been taken over by the federal government.
The Resolution Trust Corporation was formed 2 years ago to clean up the multi-billion-dollar savings and loan crisis. It was expected to handle 300 failed thrifts and be finished with the job by 1996. Was it an unrealistic goal even before thrift failures multiplied? Does the RTC have the resources to do the job? With us for some second birthday analysis is Henry Peltz. Mr. Peltz follows the thrift industry for National Bank. Good morning and thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Leslie.
Thrift failures more than doubled since the RTC started 2 years ago. Do they just have too big a job, or are they really as incompetent as critics claim?
Well, I think if you give the RTC a grade, in other words, if they were a student, I personally would give them a grade something like B or B minus, which isn't too bad. Now, the reason for that is, first of all, the problems that existed when the RTC started. There were turf fights, there was disorganization, there was a hostile Congress. Very tough to get started in an economy like that, in a background like that. The second thing is that most of the assets that they took over were very poorly documented by the savings and loans. For example, who had liens against some of the assets, who really owned the assets. The documentation that the savings and loan industry provided was very poor. The third thing is that, as you say, the pipeline of dead thrifts was supposed to have been perhaps 300. It's doubled. Perhaps it will triple by the time it's finished. The reason for that is that the regulators, the people who feed the dead thrifts to the RTC, have gotten very tough, tougher than some people thought they might. So the net result is that there's been more work to do. It's been very tough to get it done. And I think the RTC has done a pretty good job. They've closed up 460 thrifts so far. They have about 140 currently in the pipeline. And it's possible that they will close another 100 or so before they get finished.
You don't think the agency deserves the blame? There's some Congress people who say that they are in a sea of red ink and yet just want to grandstand all the time.
Well, you've got a double whammy going on there. The first one is that Congress wants to insulate itself as much as possible from the thrift scandal for obvious reasons. And they want the job to get done fast. Now, by the same token, they don't want the RTC dumping properties if those properties are located in their states. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And that's the background against which the RTC is working.
When you said that the regulators had gotten tougher than some people thought they would, do you also mean to say that there are some thrifts being shut down that would not have been shut down under, say, normal circumstances?
Well, I think so. I had in mind particularly the way the thrift regulators are looking at real estate now. And this applies not just to thrifts. This applies to all financial institutions. The regulators are taking a very tough line about the discount rates, the terminal values, so on and so forth. They have gone from a very lax kind of regulatory accounting to a regulatory accounting which is tougher than generally accepted accounting principles. And all of that has created more problems at the thrift level, in my opinion, and probably has pushed a number of thrifts over the edge.
We're out of time. We'll pick up in our next half hour where the RTC goes from here. Thanks. Our guest this morning has been Henry Peltz. He is savings and loan industry analyst at Nation Bank, and he will be back at 10 before the hour. That's Nation R Bank.
And we'll be back with the latest on communism's death in Moscow, including the latest republic to declare independence.
We'll also look at the gold market and find out just how active the Soviets have been there.
And Roderick Pratt will be along to check the latest on the European markets live from London. 27.5 past the hour on CNBC FNN. World Business continues after these messages.
GE is a family of many different kinds of people, and while it may not look like it, they all have the same job, bringing good things to life.
We are the spark in the engine, the switch in the night, a voice in the dark from a million miles away. We are the beats and the splash, the glitch and the flash. We are GE, we are the good things you hear and see. We are GE, we are the sound of surprise, and the whisper in the sky. We are GE, that's what we'll always be. We are the good things, we are GE, we bring good things to life.
Investors, the profit results are now final. The Zweig forecast is #1. The Zweig forecast beats all others with a total return close to 600% for the whole 11 years since Hulbert began tracking investment newsletters. Zweig is also tops in risk-adjusted return. That means you get higher profits and lower risk. So try the Zweig forecast now, 3 months for only $55, and get this bonus, Zweig's new price performance ratings. Call 800-472-7753, 800-472-7753.
Packaging, manuals, warranty cards, other product components, and the equipment used to manufacture all that.
Many biotech stocks have enjoyed a healthy run-up recently, but maybe not much longer. One biotech analyst tells financial correspondent Dan Dorfman
that he sees a potential bloodbath ahead for several of those firms.
You know, many biotech stocks have run wild the past week or two, but one tracker of the industry, Jim McCammon of the Medical Technology Stock Letter, says it's crazy, it's madness. These stocks are running up on hype, they're overpriced, get out of a lot of them, and let's see what stocks he thinks you ought to ditch and whether he thinks the prices could be within 6 months. We start off with number one, Somatogen, a hot stock, up 3.5 yesterday, up 4.25 the day before. The company supposedly has a product to reproduce blood, but it hasn't even been proven that a product works. It hasn't even involved in clinical trials from the FDA, and it's questioned, McCammon says, whether the company can ever produce sufficient quantities of blood. We go on to Synergen. We see it closed at 54.75. McCammon sees a price of 30. No product there, he says, for at least 2 to 3 years. The most dangerous stock around, he says, Centocor. A lot of bulls say the company should get approval next week for a product to treat septic shock, but McCammon says the big shock will be a big drop in the price of the stock because, in his view, the company will not get FDA approval. He thinks this stock should be sold immediately. We go on to Liposome, a good company, McCammon says, but again, products still 2 to 3 years away. And finally, we wind up with ICOS. This one is very interesting. McCammon says a product is at least 4 to 6 years away. Get that, 4 to 6 years away. So you have to wonder why the stock is selling at 14.5. What does McCammon say? McCammon says these are crazy, crazy prices. And don't you be crazy, he says, by buying these stocks. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'm Dan Dorfman for CNBC FNN.
Investors, here are some tough questions and some straight answers from Leslie Quick about using a discount broker.
To get the huge commission savings you people offer, what do I give up?
If you make your own investment decisions, you don't give up anything. You will get the same service from Quick and Riley that you would get from a full-service brokerage firm. Plus, you save on those commission dollars.
Many brokers now charge an inactive account fee. How do you defend that?
We don't defend it. At Quick and Riley, we've never charged for an inactive account. Basically, we believe that you should be able to buy and sell securities as you see fit with market conditions.
For answers to your questions, get this free booklet and see the huge commission savings Quick and Riley offers you. Call 800-284-2809. Call today and also get the special dividend study free. 800-284-2809.
Come join us.
Investors, let Value Line help you pinpoint stocks that could score big price gains. We'll rush you as a bonus our new ranks of 1,700 stocks for price performance in the next 12 months. We expect the 100 top-ranked stocks to outperform all the rest, but avoid the 400 lowest. Value Line has ranked stocks this way for 25 years with these powerful results. And here's a second great bonus. Value Line's current full-page reports on 1,700 stocks, each with up to 15 years of statistics, fully indexed for you in this giant reference set. Your reference will be constantly updated with more than 100 new stock reports sent to you each week. To get this reference set and new performance ranks as instant bonuses, try Value Line for 10 weeks, now only $55. Call 800-472-7753. Call today and also receive Value Line's step-by-step practical guide to better investing. 800-472-7753. Call now.
Tonight on the Dick Cavett Show, making music the Marsalis way. Trumpeter Wynton Marsalis, tonight, 9:30 Eastern.
A look at who got the biggest piece of the pie. Market Wrap, 4 p.m. weekdays on CNBC FNN Daytime. Because anticipating the market is no piece of cake.
Hillary is smart and well-connected and a terrific reporter. And when Hillary Johnson tells you something's true, she has checked it out. It is true.
About 10 minutes before the hour now. Back with us this half hour, Henry Peltz. He is savings and loan industry analyst at Nation R Bank. And since the RTC Corporation was formed 2 years ago, 640 thrifts have failed. Good morning again.
Good morning, Mark.
First of all, let me ask you this. Are we anywhere near knowing what the final price of this thing is going to be? Of course, when it got started, the estimates were a little on the low side, as it turned out. Then people started coming in with really ridiculous figures. Do you think the light at the end of the tunnel is there? Can you say with certainty or reasonable certainty?
I think the light at the end of the tunnel probably is in sight in terms of the number of thrifts that will be closed. Now, there's still an awful lot of real estate that has to be sold, and the price that is obtained for that real estate will depend on economic conditions. So it's still very hard to calculate what the ultimate cost of the savings and loan bailout will be.
Yet to be learned. All right. Let me ask you another question. They recently changed tactics in that they began packaging things rather than being a retailer. They kind of turned into a wholesaler. Seidman says he thinks that's the way to go. What do you think?
Well, I think they probably ought to try and sell real estate and loans any way they can. Remember that the government doesn't have much experience in merchandising. The RTC now is trying some of the same things that the Federal Home Loan Bank did, the predecessor agency, in effect, to the RTC. They are packaging large quantities of mortgage-backed securities. They are collateralizing, for example, commercial real estate to try and sell it that way. They're trying to sell it any way they can. And I think that that's very much in the best interests of the country. You have to present things in a way that people want to buy. And that's, I think, the key to what the RTC is doing.
In our last half hour, we talked about the extreme criticism the agency has come under for not being efficient, for wasting money. Congress wants restructuring of the agency, and that's going to hold up funding. The agency needs the money to sell off the assets. What happens? Does it come to a standstill?
Well, remember that Congress is talking about restructuring the regulators for all financial service companies. They've talked about merging the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Office of Thrift Supervision. They've talked about merging. The Brady Plan talks about reducing the number of agencies from, I think it's 5 down to 2. The entire financial service industry is in a state of flux in terms of the way the regulators are looking at them. And all of this breeds uncertainty in terms of the people that work at those agencies and the way they go about their work.
Can the RTC do its job with less money?
Probably not. They're going to have money, if not on a long-term basis, then certainly on a short-term basis as they take over assets until those assets are sold.
Does it need to be restructured?
The RTC, I think probably all government agencies need to be restructured up to a certain point.
Why don't we leave it at that, because we're out of time.
Okay.
So, a broad general statement to end it. Our guest this morning, Henry Peltz. Good to see you again, Henry. He is savings and loan industry analyst at Nation Bank. We now have 7 minutes before the hour on CNBC FNN.
Silver prices fell to 6-month lows, and there's worries the troubles in the Soviet Union could lead to a major gold sell-off. Let's take a look at the metals and how all the futures markets closed in yesterday's trading.